right, if you don't mind moving on in here, it looks like we got guys at least. We'll start singing. For the first song, let's turn to number 64 in the church hymnal. Number 64 in the church hymnal, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing thy praise. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy grace, Lord, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. All right, and number 399. Number 399, O Father, lead us. O Father, lead us gently by the hand, through sun and shadow of our future land, dim and untraveled
Good afternoon. Welcome each of you back in here this afternoon. I had a young man come to me this morning when I was standing in the back and wondered why we chose to have the youth conference on such a beautiful weekend. And I told him that there was an underlying subject that we didn't announce on the menu here on the schedule, and that was self-discipline. So I see a lot of self-disciplined people here that are willing to spend their Saturday afternoon here. I'm blessed to see you here. So this afternoon, we're going to have a short devotional by Elijah Rodenhouse. One more time.
Well, it's good to see you all here. This is my first devotion, so hopefully it all makes sense and hopefully you all can follow along. I was thinking about what to do for devotions this last week, and these verses came to my mind here in Matthew 6, verse 25 through the end of the chapter. Turn there if you want. It says, "Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your body what you shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment? Behold, the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wherefore if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewith shall we be clothed? For after all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." So these verses made me think about how our lives revolve around time so much, how we're always planning ahead, sometimes even months, sometimes even years. And for what I do for work, it's not always necessarily an option. I mean, I can't just decide one day, I'm not going to plan for tomorrow, so I don't prepare for work. I don't set my alarm clock or anything. And so of course I wake up next morning late, scramble my stuff together, and show up to work late. And my boss asks me, he's like, "Hey, what's up? Why are you late?" I'm pretty sure if I just tell him I didn't plan for the next day, I don't think he's necessarily going to accept that as an answer. So there in verse 34, it says, "Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." So it says, I don't think he's necessarily saying we can't plan ahead. I think he's more saying to not put much stock in tomorrow, or not worry about tomorrow. Because he doesn't promise us tomorrow. He doesn't promise to give us tomorrow. I also think he wants us to trust him. Like there in verse 30, it says, "Wherefore if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith?" So it says, I think he's trying to say here is, if he can clothe the grass of the field, and if he can take care of the animals and watch over them, why can't I trust him to take care of me? And especially in my own life, it's so easy because I tend to be independent, and it's easy not to trust him. And if we do trust him, he'll take care of those things. It's easy just to trust him in the smaller things in life. But when it comes to the big things in life, or the big problems, it tends to be a lot harder to trust him in those things. But if we do trust him, he will take care of us. So there in Jeremiah 17, verse 7 through 8, it says, "Blessed is the man that trusteth in the Lord, and whose hope is in the Lord. For he shall be as a tree planted by the water, and that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when the heat cometh, but her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit." So as we see here, Jeremiah's telling us when those troubles in life come or those problems in life come, if we trust him, he will help us through the hard times and he will take care of us. I also like the verse there in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on thy own understandings. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." So, I guess what I took home from these verses is, if we trust him with all our heart, and if we trust him entirely, he will take care of us, which means we don't have to worry about tomorrow, and we don't have to worry about what is coming in the future, because he will guide us. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you for sharing those thoughts, Elijah. Certainly, we can have the confidence that God is in control, and we can trust him. Doesn't matter what you're facing today, what you're thinking about for tomorrow. You can trust him, and if you think that, the older you get, the easier it's going to be to trust, I wouldn't say that's necessarily true, because I'm a farmer, and right now I have a hard time seeing rain in the forecast, and I'm having a hard time trusting that this weather is good for our crops. So that's a struggle that I'm facing. It's a real one. If you talk to me, you'll find that out. Anyway, but the Lord has always provided for my needs, and I believe that he'll continue to do that. Let's pause for a word of prayer. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Kind Heavenly Father, we pause before you this afternoon. Lord, we thank you that you are God. We thank you that you are in control of all things. It doesn't matter what the challenges are that we face, that we can rely on you. Help us to put our trust in you. Help us to be obedient to the demands that you have laid on our lives. Help us to be faithful in our calling. Just bless the speakers this afternoon. Just give them grace, give them wisdom, and help us all to be open to your spirit and your leading in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so this afternoon we have a visiting guest speaker from Missouri. Eric Weiler is here to share with us, and I'll let him introduce himself and share what he has. Lord bless you.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here in Oregon. This is my first time out here in the Willamette Valley, and just seeing the beautiful mountains. We flew over the Mount Rainier on the way in, flew in from Kansas City into Seattle, and just seeing the sights was amazing. And we also see Mount St. Helens on the way down to Eugene from the air, so that was exciting. I know a few people out here, mostly from Bible school. More people out here I knew than I thought I would. I was kind of nervous about coming the whole way out here and not really having a lot of connections in Oregon, but you guys have been very hospitable. I appreciate the devotions there, Elijah. That goes right with what I was wanting to talk about this afternoon. The part of relying on God, I think that's very important. And I also enjoyed all the other talks too, Tony's thoughts, and especially had me laughing over his thing about bungee jumping, how he doesn't really approve of that. And it made me wonder, how many of you guys still want to go bungee jumping? Raise your hand. Yep, okay, Tony, you're going to have to come back up here again. But it just shows, I didn't see any of the old people raise their hands. It seems the older people have more of a reality that they realize that we are fragile human beings, and it's sometimes us younger guys, we don't see that, and we think we're invincible, we can do anything, and we get all excited about stuff we can do. But we got to realize our time on earth is short. The other week I downloaded an app that I thought was very interesting. And what it shows is the time left here on planet Earth. This one's, I put in my birthday, and according to that, it says there's about 56 years left in my life for an average human lifespan. And I used up about a quarter of it so far, another 3/4 to go. Some of you older guys probably have a little less than that. But the reality is, we are fragile human beings. We are only one breath away from eternity. And I was looking up some statistics on the way over. Right now, there are 7.9 billion people on planet Earth. And we're all going to die, every single one of us. The human mortality rate is 100%. And I was looking at some of the most common causes of death. Right now in America, it's estimated that 23% of the population is going to die from heart disease. And, I mean, how many people is that? Maybe the first 3 rows here, you guys are all going to die from heart disease. And then there's 22% from cancer, another 3 or 4 rows. 6% are going to die in automobile accidents or some other type of unplanned accident. Another 6% in respiratory illnesses. 5% of us are going to have a stroke. 4% Alzheimer's. 3% of us are going to have diabetes. And the rest of us are probably going to die from kidney disease, flu, or pneumonia, or suicide. That's the reality of the world we live in. I'd like to turn to Isaiah 40. Isaiah 40, verse 30. I think it kind of just shows the blunt reality of our humanness here. It says, "Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall." I guess part of my testimony that I'd like to share today is a time in my life where I kind of came face to face with the reality of my mortality. And I'm not here for any self-pity or anything, and God used this for my good. And my prayer is that you guys can be encouraged by it. The story begins in 2019, approximately 2 years ago. I was working at my dad's roofing supply company at the time, and one of my friends, Travis Zimmerman, also worked there. And one day he approached me and was like, "Hey, Eric, you want to go with me to Bahamas?" I'm like, "Sure, what's going on down there?" He's like, "Oh, we're putting a work crew together, and we're going to do some house roofs, some re-roofing work, working with Cam. They had a bunch of hurricane damage down there." So, sure, that's right down my alley. I'd been doing roofing for a year or two. I had some experience, and it sounded like fun. He says, "Yeah, we're going in February. I'll get you the plane tickets." Perfect. Well, that's right over winter. I can be down nice warm Bahamas. And I was all excited about this. Well, anyways, February rolls around, and we get on the plane. We head down to Bahamas. Nice warm weather, of course. And the nation is just lovely. Even with the hurricane damage, there was, you could see the beautiful flowers coming back, and their water down there is just amazingly clear. It's not like the water around here where, well, especially in Missouri, where we have the murky ponds. I don't know how it is around here, but you can see 5-10 feet all the way down to the bottom and see all the fish swimming around there, and it's just neat, especially with the rocky beaches, and then they have the coral reefs out there. We'd go out there and snorkel and look at all the sights. The reef is just a couple feet underwater, and it was just amazing. You couldn't see it from the shore, but when you swam out there, you could see all the life underneath. It was just a whole new ecosystem down there under the water. Well, we flew out of Des Moines down to Raleigh and went through North Carolina, and then we headed down to Bahamas. From there, ended up in Nassau and took a connecting flight over to Marsh Harbor in the Abaco Islands. And from there, we split into our smaller groups, and the leader had us go off into a little smaller key. The Green Turtle Key is off the main part of Greater Abacos. And our group was just 4 of us guys. Well, it was me and Travis, and then Mike from Pennsylvania, and another Conrad from Pennsylvania. And then our leader was Atlee from Illinois, Atlee Peachy. He was in charge of making sure we got work done. And they had a house parents there. They had found a house right on the beach. And we'd get up in the morning and sit on the back porch and drink our coffee and eat our eggs while watching the sun come up above the water. It was so much fun just seeing nature. And another thing they had chickens running around free range, and people would just collect eggs from there, like the public egg store, I guess, and you'd catch them for meat, just like wild chickens or whatever. Nobody really owned them. And yeah, we were down there with Kenneth, Bernita, Jansen. They were from Canada, so there was quite a few different localities in that area, just down there trying to do a good thing, help the locals. The hurricane damage had made a lot of damage. As we drove to the island there, we would ferry back and forth to all the little islands, and there was a lot of boats still underwater at the time. This was approximately 8 months after the hurricane, and it was amazing the amount of damage. There was many trees knocked over, and the salt water had basically ravaged the whole island and killed a lot of the greenery, but it was just starting to come back when we were down there. And we enjoyed our time playing spike ball on the beach and, of course, reshingling roofs. It was the whole purpose we were down there. We had a little golf cart for our crew trip because they didn't have any vehicles on the island. They just had these tiny little streets, and it was barely big enough to drive vehicles around. So we'd load up our ladders every morning on this little golf cart and load up all our supplies and tools for the day, and we'd cruise off to find the house roof. And first one we started on was a big, steep 2-story 11-12 roof. It was right on the bay there. And we reshingled the whole roof. It took us about a week just because it was so steep, hard to get up on it. And finally, it was Friday, we finally finished that one up. And me and Atlee were there cleaning up. Friday, we were going to get ready for the next job, haul all our ladders over to the next house roof. And he said, "Hey, Eric, can you grab that ladder? We'll take it out in the golf cart, get it loaded up." Okay, sure. And so I was not paying attention. I was having a good time, and I'm cruising along here with this ladder, and all of a sudden, something went kabam, kapow, and I looked up. I knew right away what happened. Here I hit a power line. So I threw the thing as far as I could and ran, and I was leaning there against the wall like, what did I just do? Because that's the number one rule of a roofer. You watch out for power lines. I've been trained that from little up, working on the job site. And I looked up there, and here was a big old notch on the top power line, and there's a notch on the bottom one that had burned the steel wire. I'm like, why am I still alive here? What is going on? Am I a ghost or something? Like, what in the world? Apparently, I don't know what happened, but I think the power lines just connected through the aluminum ladder, and somehow it never hit the ground or reached me because I did not feel any jolt or whatsoever. The rest of the base pretty soon found out about it, much to my embarrassment. And, later there, Matt told me, he's like, he thinks God has a purpose for my life. He's like, you better realize that was a miracle. He's like, that was nothing else but a miracle. I'm like, well, okay, but I'm going to try to be more careful after this. Well, we took Saturday off and went to the beach, swimming and stuff. We went back to our little island Sunday, back to our small group. Then Monday we headed back to work, and we were getting ready to start on that new house roof. We had all our stuff over there a week before. Monday was my turn for devotions there for our small group. And I was reading in Philippians 4. Why don't we just turn to that? We can look over it. Philippians 4 is had some new thoughts for me. I figured I'd have it for devotions down there, and I'll just turn to that real quick. Paul was writing this letter. He's speaking, I think he was in jail at the time when he wrote this letter, which I'm sure was a hard time for him. Look at verse 4 there. It says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice." And we look at where Paul was at right then, I was like, how could this guy be rejoicing in the middle of prison? And probably the Roman guards are harassing him, and pretty sure he wasn't getting fed the best. I think he might have even been an older man at this time. And here he's telling these people in the Philippian church to rejoice always. And I was like, I don't understand how somebody could do that. And then further down on verse 11 there, it said, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content." I'm trying to be content in jail, which would have been hard for me. "I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me." And as I thought about that, I asked God, and I told him, "Lord, just help me understand this scripture and reveal it to me." It's a prayer that I try to pray often when I'm reading over scripture. And sometimes you got to be careful when you pray that, because God will take you serious. And I had no idea what he had in store for me. Monday morning, the sun was just coming up, and it was going to be a lovely day. We hopped on the golf carts, guys. Chilly morning breeze blowing, and we arrived at the house just as it's starting to get nice and light. This one's a little bit easier one. It's only an 8-12 pitch, and not quite as steep, but it's still a big roof. Well, at least we better just be careful. We're going to get the bottom bracing boards on. That way we don't have any problems with guys sliding off the roof or anything. We'll usually put a bottom 2x6 on the bottom eave, and then put some halfway up. That way we have something to work off of when we're shingling. And so he ran back to a little town there on the bay, and he was going to grab those on his golf cart. Well, me and Travis, we're all raring to go. And so we scrambled up on the roof, and we're going to start tearing tarps off because everything was tarped on, so we don't have any leakage issues, just for a short-term fix. And they had 1-bys down on the tarps to hold them in place. And so we're tearing these off as fast as we could. And Travis is on the peak, and I'm on the eave just below him with the shingle fork. And I reached down to grab the 1-by. I couldn't quite reach it, so I slid down the eave a little bit. And I was grabbing hold of the one edge there, and the other hand was on the peak. And I got the board loose, so I was ready to get back up on the peak because I knew this was a little bit sketch here. So suddenly, that's when my foot slipped and gave way, and I go down off the edge of the roof. I'm here hanging on the shingle fork and trying to stop myself. I just threw the shingle fork out the one side and tried to grab a hold of the edge of the roof. Well, that didn't work. Down over the edge, down over the deck, and landed on the ground 18 feet below. There it was. Knocked me out cold. Came to, Mike was there tapping on my head, telling me, "Just stay there, don't move." He's like, "We got the ambulance coming to get you." I'm like, "What in the world?" I was like, "No, I'm getting back up on that roof." I was like, "What happened, Mike? Who pushed me off the roof?" I'm like, "What's going on here?" And he's like, "You fell off?" I was like, "Well, how could I fall off a roof?" And you know how it is when you're in that groggy state. Sometimes you can't think coherently. He's nicely explained it all to me. And it dawned on me what happened. And I was laying there, and I couldn't move. Something was just wrong with my legs. I tried rolling and moving my legs, and there's no sensation there. I couldn't figure it out. Finally, the ambulance came and brought a stretcher, rolled me on my side, slid the stretcher underneath me, It was a hard backboard, and they finally grabbed me and loaded me up, and they're going to take me to a clinic there on the island. And they kept saying, "Oh, it's probably just a few broken ribs. No worries, we'll get you fixed up in no time. We just got to get you to the clinic, then we'll take you to Nassau, and it shouldn't take you long. I mean, they'll get you all healed up." And I'm like, this just isn't right. My gut's telling me something is messed up. I mean, you got a problem if you can't feel your legs. And anyways, they're giving me pain meds, and we had to wait on the ferry because the ferry took us back from the little Green Turtle back to the Abacos so we could fly out to the hospital. And it took about an hour. Finally, the ferry rolled in there, and so they ambulanced me out there and just carefully got me down on the boat and slid me right up on the big bar where they set all their suitcases. It was like a lifted spot in the center of the boat. And so I'm laying here, and I look out into the boat. I can see the water out there, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to shoot right out of the back there. Somebody's got to hold on to me. "Oh, yeah, we'll get you, and we'll hang on to you." I was like, okay. And here I was at the mercy of the people taking care of me. It was a scary feeling because I couldn't do nothing for myself. I was handicapped and crippled and strapped to this board. I kept trying to pull the straps loose. They're like, "Oh, no, you don't do that. We got to keep you on here." I was like, this is not what I'm used to. And so ferry guy fired the boat, and we go hauling across the bay and watching the water shoot out the back. They were hanging on to me. They took good care of me. Finally, we get across to the Abaco, the greater Abaco, and so they lifted me off of the boat, had to run up a ladder to get to the dock, and then up another set of stairs to get out of the dock area up onto the mainland there. And so they lifted me up, and it was just a hair-raising feeling because they were tipping me left and right, and they were freaking out because I'm sure somebody's going to slip and fall or something's going to happen. But somehow they got me out of there and slid me on the back of the truck, shoved me in. Well, the tailgate won't shut. We'll just leave it. And one guy, they're actually pumping pain meds through me the whole time because it hurt like crazy, you know. They had an IV right in my arm, and guys are holding a bag full of meds and pain medications they use. I have no idea, but it wasn't helping very much, whatever it was. And so this guy climbed up in the truck beside me, and he's hanging on to the bag, and the other two guys climbing the back too. They're hanging on to the stretcher, and all right, we start hightailing it for town. There in the back of the truck, I watched the road go behind me. I was like, this is just crazy. Like, I guess, what did I get myself into? Finally, we get to the clinic, and Matt Koblentz was there with us. He was our in charge of the camp base there, and he was all concerned. They were hoping to have a good record. We were the last crew there, and they hadn't had any other accidents, and so they were feeling pretty good about this, that they had a really good year down there with no accidents. Well, then I came along and screwed it all up for him, so he was really concerned about me, and he was very helpful in trying to make me as comfortable as possible, which there wasn't much he could do. They dragged me into the clinic there and sat me on the table. I'm still here on this stretcher. And by then it's about, I'd say it's 11 o'clock in the morning by then. And that stretcher was getting pretty uncomfortable by then. I mean, imagine you laying on a 2x4 or a 2x12 or something, like a piece of dimensional lumber, laying there for a whole morning, not able to move. Maybe move your hands, but that's about it. Plus, hurting like crazy. Well, it's kind of hard to keep a good mood. And the nurses there, their healthcare system is not like what we have here in the U.S. It's a government-run healthcare system, and the nurses were very incompetent. I was not impressed with them, but I kept asking if they could get me some more pain meds. Like, no, we can't. We gotta have a doctor's prescription, and only the doctor's allowed to give medications. And I was like, just something, like a simple pain med helped me out a lot. Well, maybe. They didn't want to do anything for me. And I was like, are you just going to get me an x-ray or something? Matt's like, yeah, we need to have some x-rays. And there's like, well, we got to wait till a doctor gets here to get x-rays. I'm like, really? How complicated is this machine to run? I told Matt, well, can you just let me run the machine and I'll get me an x-ray? Nurse was, oh, no, you don't do that. You ain't touching our machine. I was like, well, it ain't that hard to figure it out. I can tell you how to run it. And, well, they tried to help. I think they finally gave me some pain meds then, but I was still hurting quite a bit. I tried to move around a little bit. Ruben finally loosened one of the straps for me. Ruben was with me at the time, too. He arrived at the clinic the same time as Matt did. And he was trying to help me stay comfortable. I was trying to move my legs around because they felt like they were falling asleep. I figured if I move them around, they'd feel a little bit better. Well, the nurses came in there. They told me, you cannot be moving him around. This guy's in bad condition. Well, okay. I'd go out and I'd try to move around a little bit. And I guess I was being a little bit rebellious, but I wasn't in the best of the mood right then. Anyways, Matt was trying to schedule me a flight out of the greater Abacos. They had an airport there in Marsh Harbor. That's where the clinic was at. And he called up a pilot. He's like, yeah, sure. We can get him out in the next flight. We got some place left. And then Matt said, okay, we got a flight scheduled. We'll take you out there. And he called him just to make sure. And he says, you know this guy's on a stretcher, right? Well, the pilot's like, a stretcher? Well, he's got to get off that stretcher. We'll sit him up. And Matt's like, well, I don't think we can really do that. And nurse was like, oh, no, you do not get him off that stretcher. He is staying on that stretcher no matter what. Okay, well, we better be careful. Matt's like, yeah, we got to leave him on the stretcher. And pilot's like, no, I'm not taking him if he's on a stretcher. He has to be sitting on a seat. Well, that ain't going to work. So he ended up calling Grant. I can't remember his last name right now. Grant was another one of the natives on the island that was somewhat involved in the CAM base to some extent, helping him out, telling him where to go. And Grant's like, well, let me put something on the Facebook chat group. We'll see if we can find anybody, a private plane to get him off the island, because something has to be done right away. So Grant's calling around and texting around. Finally, about an hour later, he says he thinks he found somebody. There's a plane coming over from Florida. They just got done dropping off the president's daughter for her hospital checkup, so he thinks they can come pick me up. So he says they'll be here in about an hour. Well, an hour went by, another hour went by, maybe it was 2.5 hours later. It seemed like a really long time, but finally the plane landed at the airport, and he called Matt up and said, hey, Matt, the plane's here, we're ready to go. And okay, so they loaded me up in the ambulance again, and we went and hightailed it for the airport on these tiny little Bahamas roads, and it's hard to get anywhere fast when you got a lot of traffic. And Ruben was sitting in front of the ambulance, and he was telling the story about this guy. They come up behind him in the ambulance, and the guy just puts along real slow, and finally the ambulance guy was like, watch this. He blew the horn, wong, wong, and the guy whipped it off. There was a circle, one of them roundabouts coming up. He whipped off the wrong way in the roundabout, went around the other way, and he all freaked out. And so we went flying out around him. Anyways, finally ended up at the airport, and there was a little 2-seater Cessna-type plane, and he said, all right, you ready to go? Let's get you in here. I looked at this thing. I seen it out of the corner of my eyes like, you're going to get me to Florida in that little plane? Yeah, at that point they had decided that I would be going to Florida instead of Nassau, because Florida was going to have a lot better hospitals. And if we would have took the jet flight out of Marsh Harbor over to Nassau, they probably would have just left me at a hospital in Nassau. And so I can see right there's another one of the miracles God worked. It was God's leading that I didn't end up in Nassau, because I don't think I could have got near as good health care there. And so this small plane worked out perfectly. I guess the only catch was they weren't sure how they were going to fit me in there. They had a tiny little cargo area. I was like, well, we're going to have to try something. So they carried me over there and unloaded everything out of the plane. There's some other luggage in there. And then they slid my stretcher in. I had to tip it just a little bit, and they got me in just so. I had to buckle my knees just a little bit, but it was just so enough room for me to fit in there. And they threw all the suitcases back in and piled them up all beside me, and then Reuben hopped in the front of the plane, and pilot hopped in the other side, and another black lady hopped in the other side, and she was sitting in the back right next to me on top of all the suitcases yet. So here we are, ready to go on this tiny little plane. I asked the pilot, are we going to get off the runway this low? Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Well, here we go, and we had to stop at one of the other little islands close to the Abacos to drop off this black lady, and she was an interesting character. She was a Seventh-day Adventist, and she was very vocal about not eating pork and also about going to church on Saturday. So she was trying to convert me to that. I don't think it really worked, but it was one of the last things I wanted to hear, laying there with a broken back in pain, and I'm being told I can't eat pork for the rest of my life. And anyways, we talked for a while. I guess it got my mind off my pain at least, so that was nice. And finally we got her dropped off on her little island, and then we headed off for Florida. I think it was approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We finally touched down in Palm Beach, Florida, and they had an ambulance all ready to pick me up. And it was such a relief getting off the plane, and this ambulance rolls in, American ambulance, guys that were professional and they knew what they were doing. And I could relax a little bit because I knew we were back in the U.S. healthcare system, and I knew these guys, or I hope they knew what they were doing. They took me to St. Mary's Medical Center there in Palm Beach, Florida. We arrived in the ER, and they immediately went and scheduled some x-rays for me. And so at that point, they finally rolled me off the backboard. It was 4 o'clock, actually 4:30, somewhere in there, 4:30 in the afternoon. They rolled me off the backboard onto another softer board, and I can't tell you what relief it was to get off of that backboard. I was on that thing from approximately 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning all the way till 4 in the afternoon, and I was not in a good mood at that time. But finally they got me in the x-rays, spent an hour taking pictures and figuring out what was going on. Finally they wheeled me to waiting area there in the ER. The doctor came and talked with me and said, "Don't look good." He said, "You really messed yourself up pretty bad. It looks like your L1, 2, and 3 vertebrae are damaged." He says, "You don't know what extent of the damage, but there definitely needs to be surgery. You also got 2 broken wrists." Apparently when I'd landed, I don't remember hitting the ground, of course, but I'm guessing I landed with my hands down, and it snapped my wrist before it hit my back. And he says, "We got to get you into surgery ASAP. You got to get this fixed up. Surgery's the only way." And before this time, I had never really had any surgeries or anything. I didn't know what I was getting into. I called Dad and asked him, what am I supposed to do here? Dad was kind of worried about me. And he's like, "Well, does this doctor know what he's talking about? I mean, surgery? Are you really messed up that bad?" And I was like, "Well, that's what it sounds like. I mean, I haven't seen any x-rays or anything, but the doctor says I got to get into surgery right away." And he's like, "Well, I guess if that's what they say, I mean, you don't really have any other options." So he says, "Well, probably need to go ahead with it." And doctor came back and I asked him some more questions. I says, there's no other way to get through this. I have to go through surgery. He's like, you don't understand how bad it is. He says, your vertebrae are fractured to little bits. He says, I've seen other people have the same problem, break their back at that location. And he said, I've seen other people that never walked again after that incident. And he says, I think I can get you fixed up. But he says, you have to realize there is a possibility you might never walk again. He said, you got a terrible messed up back. He says he'll do his best, but sign the paperwork. We'll get you into surgery as soon as possible. He's done this before. And so nurse gave me the paperwork. I put my name down, basically trusted my life to this guy. And they went and sent me into surgery. And Dad managed to fly down. He caught the next flight down to Palm Beach, Florida. And, of course, Ruben was with me at the time. And from that point on, I don't remember very much. They started pumping anesthesia and drugs through me. And, of course, yeah, your brain can't cope with all that. There's no way to think coherently with all the drugs they put through me. I went through surgery. It was the following day, I believe. Monday I arrived in the hospital. Tuesday I went through surgery. Dad and Reuben they were there waiting for me. I was blissfully under anesthesia, and they were outside stressing. They didn't know what was going to happen. But that part was pretty easy for me. I mean, if you're knocked out cold, they can't really think about it much. So I woke up after the surgery. Doctor came in and talked to me. He says, it went really good. He says, we'll need you to go another surgery here tomorrow. So another round of anesthesia, another surgery. And what they ended up doing, the first surgery was to get into the back to clean out a bunch of the small fragments of bones. And he spent hours just picking out these little vertebrae pieces from around the spinal cord. And he basically eliminated the whole L2 vertebrae, and they replaced it with a little piece of metal to space the spine out. And that was the first surgery. Then the next following surgery, they went and put some rods, 6-inch rods. There's 4 rods total, and they put it down the spine of my back to hold the whole backbone in place. And then they screwed everything in place with a bunch of screws. And I'm so glad I didn't see that happen in real life, because I mean that would have been pretty freaky watching that. And they screwed me all in place and put the solid rods in there, and I woke up. He says, it went really good. He says, I think you'll make a full recovery. I'm like, praise the Lord. That's what I want to hear. And he's like, we'll give you a couple more days. We'll have the nerve doctor come in and check it out. And he says, I got all the bone fragments out of there that I could find. He says, the only problem you'll have is a stiff back for the rest of your life. But of course, nerve damage, we'll have to see to what extent the nerve damage is. Some of that stuff you don't really know until a couple days after the surgery. And I didn't really think about it very much at the time. I was laying there on a hospital bed, not able to move. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't even use my hands. My third surgery was at the end of the week, and then I had Band-Aids all over my hands. They put a pin in the one hand and a metal piece in the other one to hold the bones in place. And so I couldn't even run my phone or anything. It was about impossible to sleep at night because of the nagging pain, and they kept running pain meds through me. But that still didn't seem to take care of it. And as I laid there, I finally started becoming more coherent as they kept changing the pain medications. I remember one of the first thoughts I had was Philippians 4. I was thinking about that, rejoice in the Lord always. And I was like, well, that's really the only option I have. And I have to rejoice. I mean, that's what the Bible says. That's all I could think of at the time. And I also realized God's in control, whether I walk again or not. I know He has this for a purpose. And somehow that scripture stayed with me through the whole hospital stay. And even to this day, it has a new meaning to me. I can understand somewhat what Paul was referring to. There's something that God does for you when you go through them hard times. If you put your trust into Him, somehow He gives you the joy deep inside. And it's hard to explain, but it's just an amazing thing. There's no words to describe. There was a lot of people praying for me at the time, and I think that was a big thing that helped me. One of the biggest concerns there in the hospital was a lot of their patients would get depression after going through a traumatizing incident. And of course, there was an in-house psychiatrist. He would go around and talk to all the patients and ask them how they're doing. And he came to me and asked me how I'm doing. Hey, I'm doing real good. And then he asked me some more questions. And you ever have, it was more to the point questions. Are you sad or stuff like that? No, not at all. And I finally looked at me and, you guess you don't need me here. I'm leaving. So, and that, I attribute that to the amount of people that were praying for me. And I don't even know who all was praying for me at the time. I hear stuff now and then. Stuff would trickle in about so-and-so is praying out in France, or so-and-so from the Baptist church in the next town over was praying for me, and I knew my home church was praying for me. I think that made a big difference. I knew I had the support. There was a lot of people that they sacrificed a lot, especially Dad and my brother spent a lot of time staying with me there at the hospital. And also Chris and Helen Bass, they were from the New Hampshire area. And they also had a house down there in Bahamas. Well, they happened to be in Florida at the time. And Helen, she is quite the character. She has that British accent. She's originally from Great Britain. And if any of you know British people, they have a comical sense of humor. And she was one person that she'd always find the good in every situation, and she would get so excited over the little things. And in her British accent, I just got the biggest kick out of her. And she'd always be trying to bring me stuff, mostly stuff I didn't need, but one day she brought me some strawberries. That was really nice. The hospital food there is just indescribably disgusting, especially if you're in a state like that. So, seeing them strawberries, that was just the fruit from heaven right there. That was awesome. And then they went and got me some stuff at KFC. And Neil Albury was down there as well. He owns a restaurant over there in Bahamas on a different island in Manowar Key. And he was very supportive and wanted to help as much as he could. He also took care of Dad and Reuben and took care of their laundry and brought them food and stuff like that. And he was there almost every other day, just wanting to try to support me and stuff. And it was amazing that they could sacrifice so much time. I'll forever be indebted to people. It's a humbling experience when you're stuck there like that and you have to rely on so many other people to do things for you. Oh, the other thing, I learned a lot about hospitals being there. I also learned what code blue means. Who all knows what code blue is? Yeah, there's a few of you. Well, there's a button on the wall right above my bed that it's a bright blue button. It said code blue, but I didn't know what it means. The nurse had told me before, hey, if you ever need something, you press this little button right here on the side of the bed. And that'll make the nurse come running. Okay, well, I pressed the button one day, and nobody comes. Press it again, still nobody comes. Well, this is getting old after a while. Well, let's see what the blue button does. Hit the blue button. And all of a sudden, a loud siren comes out, and nurses come running from every direction and pile into my room. Doctors come running, and I was like, wow, what's going on here? And Dad was there at the time, and he says, well, they're asking me, who's dying? Is he breathing? And code blue apparently means that somebody is dying or is not breathing or something like that. And so they had all their equipment with them. Dad's like, oh, there's no problem. It is just an accident. And they want to look in, make sure that I'm still alive. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I just needed a nurse. And, well, the nurse was right there and just took care of me then. So either way, it worked out. And I learned what code blue means. But the other amazing thing of being there in the hospital is being able to witness to different people, witness to the nurses. There's a lot of rough characters in that same hospital, in the same area where we were at. The most popular, most often people would come in there because of either shooting accidents or vehicle accidents. That was a big thing down there in Palm Beach, Florida. There was a lot of shootings going on. And I talked to one young man that he had actually had pretty much the same injuries I did. He had a bullet come through his spine, and so it nicked his spine a little bit. And so he was in the hospital for that. And I talked to him. He's like, yeah, he needs to get his life straightened up. He's like, yeah, what happened is him and his girlfriend were going to get some drugs there, and the drug dealer didn't want to, want some more money out of her and something. And so he came after him with a gun, and so they would run towards the vehicle, and he kind of sheltered his girlfriend, and took the blast. He shot him point blank there, and then he was stuck in the hospital for a couple of weeks. He's like, this is just a wake-up call for me. He's like, I need to try to do a little bit better. I told him, I tried to explain to him that he needs something more than just getting his life straightened up. And I didn't see him. I only see him like once or twice, and then he moved on to another part of the hospital. I also got a chance to talk to some of the nurses. And remember one nurse, I was asking her how her church life was going, and she's like, well, she used to go to church, and she said she kind of got away from it when she moved to Florida. Didn't really have any close churches around. I told her, you need to find a church, and I'll pray that you find a church. And I don't know whatever happened out of that, but I trust the Lord. The Lord worked His will in that area. And I don't know, there might have been more people that I was able to witness to. I know the one doctor in there, he was talking to me. I told him, it's a miracle that I'm healing up this way. He's like, yeah. He says, I guess whatever you want to believe to make you happy. I couldn't believe it. Like, there's a doctor that works on these intricate human beings every day, and yet he's still subscribed to the atheist culture. And it was interesting meeting all the different people there. Finally, I was ready to go through some therapy, basically get movement back. I was getting to the point where I could get in and out of bed with a lot of help, of course. And they kept pushing me off at therapy there at the hospital. They said, we're full in therapy, we can't get you down there. And kept pushing me off a couple more days. I told Dad, I'm sick and tired of this. I want to go home. And we found a therapy up in Des Moines, Iowa. And we also found a flight in there. And Dad's like, you can't get out of bed in more than 3 hours at a time. That was when I was out of bed. I was sitting in a wheelchair, basically. He says, your flight's going to take 6 hours to get to Des Moines. I was like, yeah, I know. And I said, let's try one more time to get into therapy. And I asked him again, well, it's going to be one more day yet. I was like, this settles it. I'm going home. Dad booked the plane tickets, and 4 o'clock that morning, we were ready to head out, head for the airport. And I was very worried. I woke up at 4 o'clock. I told Dad, I don't know if this is a good idea. He's like, well, you booked the plane tickets. We got to go. We're not going to waste our plane tickets. And I was like, I guess, but I don't know if I can make it. What's going to happen? And I was like, well, I guess we'll find out. And I realized I guess you just have to trust God and see what happens. And we get to the airport. The first leg of our flight went very good. We went from Palm Beach to Charlotte, North Carolina. Landed there, and when we got to Charlotte, there was a huge bank of fog rolled in right then, and basically shut down a lot of the flights. A lot of them were delayed. Of course, ours was delayed too. And so we waited an hour. Hour and a half went by. Looked at the board. What the world? Our flight's canceled. Well, now we're stuck here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, they went and booked us another flight, and we said, we can't get you to Des Moines. You're going to have to take another connecting flight over to Chicago and then to Des Moines. I was like, oh no. I'm here in a wheelchair, running Tylenol through me as fast as I was allowed to, and my back was getting worse and worse. By then I was up about 6 hours, and we were finally ready to board our other flight, and I was like, how long am I going to last? Eventually, I'm going to faint because of the pain or something. And I was texting some of my friends. I told them, hey, pray for me. Our flights are getting canceled. And so we're cruising through the airport, trying to find our gate, going from one gate to the next. And somehow we got hooked up with this short little African guy that he was a jolly feller. He was about 19. And he wanted to know, you Christian? Oh, yeah. Hey, what's your favorite Bible verse? I was like, well, lately it's been Philippians 4. It's meaning a lot to me. And, all righty, good. And so we were talking about different scripture and stuff like that. And suddenly his little walkie-talkie started shrieking and carrying on. He's like, oh, boy, it's the devil. The devil's in my walkie-talkie. And he's like, we got to shut this thing off. And I was like, I was just laughing at him. He was one of them charismatic types. And we got that thing shut off. And we go back to talking. He's like, yeah, the devil don't like when we talk about scripture, so he'll do stuff like that. I was like, yeah, you could be right. And anyways, we're there talking. And there's another older lady beside us. She was going to go on the next flight. And she was really having a hard time about this whole flight cancellation and in a wheelchair and all. And she was just going on and cussing the blue streak about how lousy these airports are and everything. And we struck up a little bit of conversation. And I told her where I was from, where I was headed. And she's like, you got a broken back? I was like, really? And you're okay. She couldn't believe it. And after that, she thought for a while, she was really quiet. And then we're ready to go on our next flight. And she was laughing with the flight attendants and just jolly as all get out. I guess she realized she didn't really have it that bad. But anyways, we finally end up in Des Moines there, 4 o'clock that afternoon. It was approximately 12 hours after we left the hospital. And I was amazed that I had went that long with only 3. Before that, it was like 3 hours I could manage in a wheelchair. And now I ended up 12 hours in an upright position. And here I was in Des Moines. I guess God worked another miracle there. I don't know how else to explain it, but from then on, went through quite a bit of therapy. I was in Des Moines for another week and a half approximately. And then I went and signed up for some outpatient therapy. And the time I was in a wheelchair was from February, March. It was probably about the middle of March that I finally graduated to a cane, and then I could walk with the cane March, April. This is all in 2020. I think it would have been about May before I could actually get around without a cane or walker or any type of assistance. And it's just a miracle what God done for me through that time. The amazing healing that God gives us. And I don't know, I still wonder what the full purpose of going through that whole situation is, and I don't know if I'll ever completely understand it, but I will say that I learned a lot about trusting God when through the hard times and relying on him through every situation like that. When things like that are completely out of your control, you don't really have a choice but to trust God, or else become depressed and commit spiritual suicide. It can either lead you to become bitter or better. And I think the only reason that I did not become bitter through the whole accident was because I knew I had friends praying for me, and I knew I had a support group of people that cared about me. And it's not to my own glory. It's all to the glory of God. I think it's an amazing thing when God can work through our lives like that. And we heard a lot about serving and giving up of ourselves. And that's a daily struggle of sacrificing ourselves. It's a battle we have to fight every day. Every single one of you guys got a battle that you're dealing with right now. I don't know what it is, but I think part of having a struggle, God allows us to go through hard times just to keep us humble. And it also helps us to grow in our spiritual walk of life. And I think we need to be thankful for the struggles we have in our life. And it helps us realize that we're still mortal humans. Too often, when life is going easy for us, we start relying on ourselves more and more, and pretty soon we don't need God anymore. I mean, in reality, if you are living the Christian life, you're going to have struggles. If you're not having a struggle, I can probably safely say you're not a Christian, because God promised us that our life is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. I think struggles like that is a way God shows us that He really loves us and is preparing us for bigger things, for more responsibility. And He cares about us even if we fail. That doesn't mean we're worthless. God loves us enough to give us another chance and work through us fragile human beings, I think is an amazing, amazing thing. But I guess for me, sometimes I struggle with just being humble. And too often, when I have a hard time in my life and I try to, well, maybe I'll go find another self-help book at the store or look it up. I think I can figure it out on my own, but in reality, this is all we need, the Bible right here. This tells us everything we need. All we need to do is read it, and that's something I have to remind myself every day, is just to look into the Scriptures and glean something out of it every day. As we grow older, we have more and more responsibilities, and who knows, some of us youth here, we'll probably be ministers, church leaders someday. And I think we need to be able to accept them responsibility and grow into it and still stay humble. And the way we stay humble is by relying on God and realizing our mortality. I was reading an article about Jehu. He was one of the kings of Israel, I think. He was a very zealous man, and he spent a lot of time getting rid of the Baal worshipers. Maybe we should just turn to that in 2 Kings 9. It's kind of an interesting story. He was one of the biggest, I guess you could call him a missionary, because he made a lot of major changes. He came right after the time of King Ahab, and we all know King Ahab was a very wicked man. I'm just going to pick a few verses out here and there. See, I'm running out of time. 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 20, it talks about Jehu. Well, I guess part of the backstory is he got anointed king, and the prophet prophesied, I think it was Elijah that prophesied that he was going to destroy the house of Ahab utterly and destroy all his sons and Jezebel and get rid of Baal in the land. And so, of course, Jehu's a young man. He's all excited about this, raring to go into the city and start doing his great mission work. And here it talks about the watchman. And the watchman told, saying, he came even unto them and coming out again. He saw him driving furiously into the city. And I just have to think about one of my friends is known as a furious driver. I'm not going to say his name here because he'd probably incriminate me too. But I can just imagine King Jehu. If he'd lived today, he'd probably drive a big 4x4 pickup with a big stack out the back and tune pretty good and go ripping around town. And he was going to get a lot done. And he probably had a lot of dreams of making big money and doing great things for the Lord. And as we read further down chapter 9, it also talks about, well, Joram knew he was coming, and when the watchman told him, he seen Jehu coming into the city, and Joram went out to meet Jehu and asked him, "Is it peace, Jehu?" There in verse 22, because he was concerned what was going to happen to his family. And Jehu answered, "What peace, so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many?" And Joram turned his hands and fled and said to Ahaziah, "There is treachery, O Ahaziah." And Jehu drew a bow with full strength and smote Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went out of his heart, and he sunk in his chariot. And that was the first one of the family he killed. And then if you read further down the chapter, it talks about how I guess it starts in chapter 10. He got Ahab's 70 sons together, and he basically pulled a trick on them and told them that they're going to have a big fellowship for Baal here. They're going to have a big fellowship meeting, and they're going to talk about how to serve Baal better and everything. And he gets all these sons together, and I don't know why they trusted him, because in the earlier end of chapter 9, it also talks about where Jehu went and killed Jezebel too. She was sitting there at the window, and he told the servants to throw her down, and then they killed her. But somehow the sons trusted Jehu, and they went to this big meeting about Baal, and Jehu went and slaughtered every single one of them and basically destroyed Ahab's family. And also, as I read further down, he fulfilled the prophecy that Elijah spoke. But then there's one little word down here, chapter 10, verse 29. It says, "Howbeit." It's just a scary sign of things to come. Howbeit. Howbeit from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. What is going on here? This guy was doing so many great things, and suddenly, here it talks about sin. He left some golden calves in Bethel and Dan, is what it says here in the scriptures. And the Lord pronounced a judgment on him, and the Lord said unto Jehu, here in verse 30, "Because thou hast done well in executing that which is right in mine eyes, and hast done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart, the children of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel." And God did give him a good blessing for the things he did. But it says in verse 31, "But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. For he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel to sin." How can this guy that started off so good and do so many great things for the Lord basically destroy the whole religion of Baal there in the country, and now here he is. He falls away from God. And I think the first thing that the problem was he lost his humility. He was relying too much on himself. And I think that should be a concern to us, that we don't have that happen in our own lives. I mean, we're young. We think we can do everything. We're going to achieve great things for the Lord. But we need to remember that if we do not rely on God, we're going to miss out like Jehu. And what's going to happen? Are we going to get to the judgment throne, and God's going to say to us, "Howbeit that you did not follow all my commandments"? You did all these great things. Howbeit that you fell into sin. Howbeit that your smartphone habits weren't glorifying me. Howbeit that your truck became more of an idol and became more of a god than I was. Howbeit that we did not serve our church and always complained against our church, and we were tearing our church down. I fall into those things so many times, and every day we have to look at our lives and look at ourselves and find the sinful things. It seems there's always little things that crop up, and that's part of fighting the battle every day. And I think we need to, I guess for some ideas of coming up with, we need to make this practical somehow. Somehow we need to train ourselves to constantly stay on the goal. And we heard a lot about vision last night especially. We need to stay on the vision of serving God and giving our all to Him. And I think prayer is one of the biggest things to keep our prayer life up, and we never should underestimate the power of prayer. That's going to be the single biggest thing that's going to get us to heaven. Also, we need to find friends that support us. One thing our church started doing recently, and this is among the youth guys, we started doing accountability where we connect with each other once a week and just sit down and talk about how's things going in our own lives and what are things we can do to encourage each other to make things better and draw us closer to God. And of course, we have the scriptures to daily read and guide us. Everything's in there. We just have to look into it and apply it to ourselves. And in the end, like I said before, we need to remember we are fragile human beings, and we cannot do anything without Jesus Christ working in our lives. One verse that I like, that kind of sums it up, and I think we'll read it together. It's in Galatians 2, verse 20. Why don't we all stand and we'll just read it. I'd recommend committing this one to memory, because if we can follow that verse and apply it to our lives every day, I think it'll make a big difference. Let's all stand. And we'll read it together here. Galatians 2, verse 20. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we ask you to help us apply this verse to our lives today. Lord, help us to always remember to sacrifice for you and crucify the flesh in every little detail of our lives. You know what's sitting on the throne of our heart and what's getting all of our attention. Lord, just help us to draw closer to you and use that as a witness to the people around us that we may meet as we go out into our mission field. Amen. You may be seated.
Well, how many of you decided you wanted to go into the roofing business? Oh. Okay, well, you did a good job of scaring them off. How many of you decided that you want the Lord to be Lord of your life and you're willing to serve Him? All right, you did a good job. Thank you, Eric, for sharing. I realize sharing personal things that happen in your life can be a little intimidating, but we thank you for your willingness. Okay, it's time for a break. I will dismiss here, and we'll give you 10 minutes, so be back in here by 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. So you're dismissed. And I think there's a break on the other side.
There we go. Could we get started, please? Thank you. If my panelists could come forward, I have seats for you. Okay, yeah. All right, Danny, you're first. Danny, Amy, George, Melinda, Jason, Amanda on the end, if you have questions. The next one, George, there we go. All right, good afternoon. Welcome back to the meeting. We have a panel discussion. We're going to begin by letting each one of the panelists introduce themselves with, I forgot to think through this one completely, but I want a name, a location, and one thing you're thankful for. And we'll start with you, Danny, if you can come up with something that quick. Where you're from, as in location. Speak into the microphone.
Yep, I'm Danny Troyer, and I'm from here. I guess right now I'm thankful for work.
I am Amy Byler, and I teach school in Madras, Oregon, and I'm thankful for my students.
My name is George Sham, and I'm from Halsey, Oregon, and I'm thankful for 2 legs that work.
My name is Melinda Berkey, and I'm from here in Halsey, and I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to serve even when we're very scared.
Jason Hirsch from Hamilton, Montana, and I'm grateful for the love of God.
Mandy Martin from La Grande, Oregon, and I'm thankful for my family.
Very good, thank you. And thank each one of you for helping out and taking part here, whether you wanted to or not. Some were short notice. Some had longer to think about it and think they were out of it and things like that. But nonetheless, you're all up front now and it's too late. So, a little bit of a format and how this is going to work. I have a few questions or topics. They mostly come out in question form. So as how this is going to happen is I'm going to ask one of you, you guys are in couples, for ease of saying things. So Danny and Amy, you're going to be in that form, you're person 1 and person 2, or the other way around. So person 1 is, I'm going to ask the question or give the topic. Person 1 is going to get 2 minutes to answer. Person 2 then gets 1 minute to respond to that or add to it. And after that, each panelist will get a chance to respond for 30 seconds each, up to 30 seconds. And occasionally, if I feel that it's a good discussion or if it's not going or whatever, I will also open it up to the audience potentially. And after that, person 1 will get 30 seconds to rebut whatever was said, or agree with, or however they feel that they need to close it up. I'll have questions. I will also have a few what I call quick answer questions. Each one of the panelists will get 30 seconds to answer the question. We'll just go through the line if you have something to say. And here again, I may open it up to the audience. And if we have time, since we're running late and stuff, but if we have time at the end, if you guys have questions for any one of the panelists, I may think about that. All right, so we are going to begin with, please speak into the microphone whenever you answer. I will give you warning when your time is running out. Jason, you're first off right here. My question is, do you think youth are as willing to serve on the foreign mission field as they used to be, now as they used to be? Why or why not?
I think it's some of both. I think some young people view it as an opportunity, short term especially, as a change of scenery and out of an answer to curiosity as far as what's out there. And I think some hesitate because it can bring up questions.
Mandy, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it could be some of both, but nowadays if you go to a foreign mission field, it is easier to communicate with people where you came from back home, or even have people come visit you, and maybe it may not make it as much of a sacrifice, or you won't feel so much like you're so far away.
All right. Do any of the rest of you have anything to add? The question was, do you think youth today are as willing to serve on the mission field as they used to be? Or is it not viewed as something as cool? Or is it too much work? Or is it what we want to do? Melinda, you went to a foreign country. Do you have anything to say?
I think that I agree with what Jason said. I think it can, a big temptation can be using, especially short term, which I don't know, 3 months or less, maybe short term, as a trip or as something exciting or something to post about and brag about on social media. But I also believe that there's a lot of youth with a lot of potential that want to go places but just don't know where to go, or feel like they're not enough for what they would like to do.
Does the audience have any follow-up questions to that?
What did you mean, Melinda? What's not enough?
Like people being scared of not being able to do what they would like to do.
Jason, do you have anything to say? You like that? All right, we are going to go on to the next one. George. So since the weekend was on serving, I'm hitting my service questions first. George, how does living in an affluent society, one like most of us are in, or all of us, with lots of money and vehicles and not so much time, how does that affect our service or how we serve God, whether it's in our own community or whether we go somewhere else? How does all the money affect us? Go ahead. Use the microphone.
I think, like, in America, we can get relaxed and not depend on God as much as we should. Does that answer your question, or?
So you're saying that because we live in America and we have all this money and stuff going on, it makes it easier or harder to serve God?
Did I say easier?
I don't know. Just clarifying
Makes
which
it,
one.
yeah, it makes it harder, sorry.
Okay.
Definitely
Just
makes it harder
clearing that up.
to serve God, yeah.
Melinda.
I think this is speaking from experience, but I think that living in this society can make us feel like it can make a very entitled person, and when they do leave and serve somewhere else, they can feel like they're really, I could feel like I was really in a difficult situation where in comparison to those people, the lives they're living, I have it extremely well. So I think it can kind of, we live in a false reality, which can, yeah, not saying you can't change your mindset.
Anyone else? Amy, have anything to say?
I think money drives us all because we have lots of friends, we have lots of places to go, and because of that, I think often, I don't know if this is where you were headed with this or not, I might have taken it down another trail, but because of that, the drive is to work so we can do stuff, go do stuff. And because of that drive, it's a very self-focused drive, and because of that drive, we often tend to see the places around us, the things around us, the needs around us that need help.
Anyone else? We will go on. I have a quick answer question. Every one of you, I want an answer, even if it's the same as what the person before you said. So Tony had a message this morning on whatever it was called, something about the fear factor and how that works. And so my question is, why is it so hard? We're going to start with you, Amanda. Why is it so hard for us to go knock on our neighbor's door and ask them about God or talk to them about God? Or when we're in town, why do we find it so difficult?
I think one of the reasons that we find it harder to minister to or witness to the people, like our neighbors or close to us, they see how we can live in everyday life. Like they observe us and actually see if we're living out what we teach them. That can be kind of scary.
I think the scariest part for me is the follow-up, because someone that we rub shoulders with all the time, they're going to be, obviously they can see the way we're living. And if something isn't quite lining up, they can ask us about it. Whereas if it's someone on the street somewhere where we don't typically go, we can testify and we can sound all good, and there's no potential for them to watch and see anything that's not going to line up, and there'll be a lot less chance of them coming back to question.
If you're referring to just meeting with a random person in town, I would say my fear is that I'm going to, especially in today's society, that I'm going to get into a conversation or argument that I can't finish because I'm not educated enough.
I think fear plays into a lot of what they will think and say about us if we're trying to share the gospel with them. And yeah, in America, they're gonna watch our actions a lot more than what we say.
For me, it would be like Melinda, the fear of not having an answer.
I think for me, and I guess I could be a little vulnerable here, but like for me to go out and share the gospel, and I think one thing that can hinder you a lot is if you have something in your life that's not taken care of, and you have that fear of them asking questions and digging deep and going, what about that? And then what are you going to give your answer? So I think having a clear conscience, being focused on God and actually living the Christian life to the best of our ability, that's going to affect how we witness.
All right. So I'll give you all a chance to say something else if you care to, but how you kind of just, I was planning this question along as you guys were talking, all of a sudden you answered it sort of, but how do we fix this fear? How do we overcome this fear? Does anybody care to expound on what Danny kind of answered on that one, or have something to add to what you said before?
The answer to not having an answer would be, well, the fear of not having an answer would be practice, because you're never going to be comfortable with it, but you're never going to get comfortable with it unless you do it.
Anything else? So we are going to go on. The rest of these questions aren't really tied together, so just go ahead and let your brain do its flips and keep up as we find where they go. Amy, should we be more concerned about mental health in our communities? Then every community has a slightly different take on mental health, but it seems like the farther we go in society and in time, the more mental health ties into everyday living, or else they were just really ignorant back in the day, one or the other. But what would you say? Should we be more concerned than we are, or are we doing it right?
I would definitely say it's a very valid concern, and we need to realize that it is an issue. And along with that, I think the only way to, let's see, how do you say this? The only way to realize it is an issue is to be open with our own lives, and out of the same openness, hopefully those around us will also be open. But never to undermine that there's a problem here. But if we ourselves are dealing with that problem, I think we need to see, are we thinking of ourselves too much to where we're becoming tied up in it? Or are we truly reaching out to those around us and being willing to help them and to be helped ourselves?
Danny?
I think mental health is definitely a thing that, I guess from my experience, that we should try to become more educated on. There's many, many aspects of mental health, and there's a lot of, I guess you would say, things out there that affect us in a way that we don't understand. And then when you start digging down deep, you realize it's a lot more serious than you initially think. And yeah, so I would say becoming more educated on a lot of those different mental health and things like that, it would be very good as far as the church goes.
Any of the rest of you have anything to say?
Back to the thing where you said that back in the day they might not have been as ignorant, or they would have been more ignorant. I think back in the day they didn't have as many things, but they had more time. And I think the biggest reason that we deal with mental health now is that everybody has things and answers, but no time.
How about the audience? Any of you have anything to add to the mental health discussion? or are we just all okay mentally?
Are you kind of thinking about that in the context of service in our community, or are you thinking that in context of internal needs?
Internal needs, yeah, not so much the service idea as how we relate to the person in our congregation that has mental problems. Do we just write them off, say they'll come out of it on their own, or do we focus on it? There's a lot of different ways to do this. I think we used to, every issue is a spiritual issue. And so if someone was having mental issues, it was obviously that they had a spiritual problem. And we have lots of mental issues which are spiritual problems. But there are, in my opinion, there are also mental issues that need to be addressed, but they are so closely intertwined that you need to, they're very, very closely intertwined.
I think, kind of along with what Tony was saying, it's kind of where my mind was going too. I know, yeah. You weren't just trying to listen to preachers here. Because of, we talked about not used to have problems. I think we've had the problem. We tended to call it spiritual problems. And so we actually, sometimes when the real problems have hindered rather than helped. And also we made it, there's a tendency there that's made it so it's not safe. It's not safe for people to talk or to be open about their needs. Physical health needs are difficult. Mental health needs are impossible. And on the other side, we have a lot of the psychiatry and so forth today, and this whole self-awareness, meditation push that is trying to take care of spiritual problems with wrong mental health solutions. And so we have a reaction to that. And so I guess probably what I would plead with us is to be understanding and be careful not to stigmatize people. And probably even ourselves if we're facing these real issues. It's something we need to seek professional help for sometimes.
Any of you have anything to say?
It'd be interesting to kick it back to the panel and just ask them, do you think it's possible to be mentally sick and spiritually healthy simultaneously?
Amy, you're going to get to finish, so if any of the rest of you, Melinda, you can't back up far enough.
Your question is, can you be mentally unhealthy and spiritually healthy? That's what I would say yes, you could be, because, well, I'm not educated enough to know all the big words, but I would say yes. We were talking about this the other day with our youth group, and we were talking about if it can be like a genetically passed down thing. And I believe that it can be, maybe not the entire problem, but some people can have a weakness or a more sensitive part of them.
Any of the rest of you? You said it could be a passed down trait, mental.
Weakness, yeah.
But we can choose to get out of it at any time, correct? No? Just checking. Let me put it this way then, to any one of you. If mental health is passed down to us, it's kind of in the family. This is difficult. What's it going to take for it to stop, or will it continue on forever?
I don't think it has to continue on. When you realize that that's a problem, and I think it's your responsibility to actually do something about it. Yeah, it doesn't need to be perpetual through generation and generation. You can get the education and fix it, and it probably is maybe more education as far as, you know, stuff you didn't know, but also spiritually as well. It could be both, I think, but yeah, it does not need to continue, in my opinion.
Amy, what do you have to say?
I would definitely agree with that. I was reading a book, and I recommend it very highly. Switch on your brain. Every single morning, we get new brain cells. And the choices we make, if we make consistent choices, our brain patterns change. And it's still a very real problem, and you will, let's say your parents had it and your grandparents had it, it's going to be your struggle, but you can change the pattern.
All right. Let's go to another quick answer question. Has to do with technology. How does modern technology, such as the internet and smartphones and social media, you know, I'm not talking microwaves and airplanes and stuff like that. Everything's technology. I'm saying, you know, the stuff that's facing us today with technology, how does that affect how we serve God? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? Is it helpful to have social media to serve God? Who wants to start? George, you want to start?
What did you pick on me?
You look like you need to talk some more.
I think it's a tool, and it can be used for really bad things, but also it can be used to further the kingdom. And you can get Bible apps, which I have, and they're really handy, and read off scripture. And since I think I'm not a very good reader, it's nice. You can just stick scripture on and memorize scripture that way.
Melinda.
I think that it can appear to be a really useful, helpful thing. Not saying it can't be, but I think it's a very thin gray line sometimes. But I believe it can be used to an extreme good, but also can be something that appears like an extreme good that isn't necessarily that way.
Jason?
I believe that technology is what you make it. You can take, for instance, Africa is using drones to fly supplies in to people that need them. And then you can read American headlines where people are using drones to stalk others. Same is true with our cell phones. We can reach out and we can be a tremendous help, or we can be ruining ourselves and ruining everyone around us.
I agree that it can either be a help or a hindrance to you. Depends how your heart is, maybe, is how you'll use it.
One of you two down here.
I think technology and social media can definitely is a good thing. There's so many things in technology, the internet and everything, that has gotten a bad rap often. And maybe it's because we didn't learn how to use it right. But if we would have early on started using it, and I think like social media could be used in the church to Like, I don't know, I've often thought of it about like CAM. You know, they could advertise social media versus the billboards. I think you could reach a lot more people. But that's my opinion. And so like something like that, I think, you know, it can be used, it's how you use it. That's the important part.
It can be a tool, but I think for the majority of us, just to be perfectly honest, it's a tremendous time waster. And it eats up way too many hours of our time, and we become blinded to those around us because of it.
Very good. Any of you have anything else to say? Probably way too much, but like anything constructive to say. So I'm going to have one more little quick answer. It's going to be really quick unless you make it long. After that, if any of you have any questions or thoughts on any of what we've covered so far, that would be the time. I don't know if we're halfway through or over half, if you go by the time, whatever it is. And then there'll be another one at the end, hopefully. So I'm going to do this one quickly, and then we'll see what you have to say. So my next question. Just, it's yes or no, or if you need to elaborate, that's great. Do you think if our parents, grandparents, however far back you want to go, had known the effects of smartphones, they would have taken a stand against it like they did TV, radio, and some of those other things? We're just going to start with you, Danny. If it's more than yes or no, that's fine, but...
The question is, if they would have known, would they took a stand against it?
Yeah, if they knew where we were today with smartphone technology, cell phone technology, let's go with.
Yeah. I really don't know. I mean, yeah, as far as if they would have took a stand against it, I don't think that's a healthy way to do anything, is take a stand against it. I think you need to learn how to use it, because we do use it. And so, but yeah.
So you're saying it's not good that they took a stand against TV and radio?
Well, I don't know.
We're keeping this quick.
No, I do not believe so. Like you said, we use it a lot, and it is on how to use it. And yeah.
Could you run that past me one more time?
Do you think if our parents and grandparents had known where we would be with cell phones today and smartphones, that they would have taken a stand against it like they took a stand against TV and radio back in the way back?
I want to say they would have. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Yes, I believe they would have.
I don't think mine would have.
Yeah, I think they would have too.
Does the audience have anything to add to that one? Or another question? Or comment on any of them?
Yes, so the goal of technology is to make communication and things that we need to get done faster and easier. And it makes good men do good things faster. It makes evil men do evil things faster. Having said that, what happened to our doctrine of separation that the Mennonites have stood for all these years? Why are we allowing this communication device that ties us into the evil men? Where do we need to have a stand on that?
Any of you?
And I don't think it's fair to throw the internet and the cell phone into that category, because you can use any technology that we have today for that reason. you can take a car and go somewhere where you're not supposed to. And we use cars all the time. And just, that's an example. That's what I think.
Anything else?
Just think about your original question. Considering how TV and radio were actually fairly innocent when they first became a regularly used thing, and considering how hard it was stand through against it, I think they would be horrified, shocked, and really, really like not impressed. So I think we would have to just do it.
Okay. Any questions for the panel?
Kind of a follow-up question on that. Should they have? Like, what do you think? Do you think we would be better off today if they had taken a stand against it, or would we be sheltered and confused about it? What do you think?
Any one of you can answer that question, or all of you.
At some point, you have to decide, is it okay to be splitting hairs as far as technology? Because, I mean, we use a cup to drink water, right? At some point, that was technology. Instead of just bending over a stream and drinking clean out of the stream, we put it in something and then drink out of that. So I don't think, like, when technology comes out, it's not necessarily about, we can't necessarily know for sure where it's going to take us, because it is a change. And we can't, I mean, we're not God. We can't see where that change is going to lead us, right? So when these technology things came, if we all of a sudden start, because phones and internet and television, radio, whatever, all of a sudden made a bigger jump than some of the later technology made, I think at some point you're creating a division that wasn't, or it doesn't have to be there, because it's not how you, like, is technology good? Because all of us use a lot of technology if we break it down that simple.
Anything else?
So based on the assumption that is probably accurate unless there's a disruption in civilization, if the assumption is that the changes we've seen in the last 20 years are probably accelerating at this point, so what our grandparents couldn't see coming, we have to assume we can't see coming in the next 20 years to an exponential degree. So if it would have been better for grandparents to have thrown the e-brake 20 years ago, by extension, should we be smoking them now? Should we be standing on the brake now? Or what, if it's going to change more in the next 20 years than it did in the last 20, what about, what are our grandchildren going to say about what we think now? Or what's the panel's thoughts on that looking forward?
I'm just the moderator. Amanda, do you have any thoughts down there?
Not really anything different than what was said, but like they probably thought that television and radio was a big thing, and if, like, we can't obviously see what is going to be in the next 20 years. So I think if we just take each thing as it comes along and make a good of a decision and a stand against it as it comes along, or learn how to use it as it comes along, that can be a good thing.
Anything else? All right, we will move on to the next one. Melinda, this is your question. With how respect for authority and older ones has broken down in society around us, how has that affected us and how we view authority and the older ones in our Anabaptist communities, in our churches? We look at the world around us and how they do not respect authority, or the elderly do not get respect just because they're old. Has that infiltrated us? How does it affect us? Does it not affect us at all? Because if we go to Leviticus 19, it says, "Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man." And 1 Peter 5:5, "Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder." Like, we have perfect commands, but is it infiltrating us? Go ahead.
I would say well, just the first thing that came to my mind, I would say yes, I think it is infiltrating us. And the first thing that came to my mind is this mental health conversation, for example, because us younger ones in this room are, let's just stereotype it and say that a lot of us have a lot more access to social media and things that really kind of talk about and educate us for this mental health conversation. We can get a attitude above the older people that we don't necessarily, well, we shouldn't have, because we can tend to think we're more educated and we know more just because we spend more time on the internet. I'm saying we, I should say I spend more time on the internet, researching, looking, reading stuff that isn't necessarily factual. Therefore, I think that with the new age of technology and a lot of us having access to all sorts of information, be it accurate or not, it can definitely create an attitude that we're just more up in the world of knowledge.
George.
Your question was, how does it affect us when we don't listen to elderly advice?
No, how does the world around us being so arrogant and disrespectful to authority, how has that affected us as a community or as a people that believe the Bible that says that we should honor those in authority and older than us? So the people around us do not, but we're supposed to. Does it affect us at all?
I think it does, like as mankind, it's the nature of mankind who doesn't want to listen to the wise. Like me taking advice from my dad, I'd be better off listening to him and not having there's a feeling within me that wants to like let me figure it out on my own, than humbling myself and taking advice from him.
Any one of you other ones? Jason? Andy? Anything? Melinda, what do you have to say? Nothing? Alrighty. We're going to go on. Mandy, your turn. What are some ways What are some ways we justify gossip and allow it into our lives, not thinking about the impact it has on others or us? Go ahead.
I think sometimes we can justify gossip and spread it around. We can try to make ourselves look better. Yeah. And also I think it can, or if we spread it around and we think it's true, I don't know, sometimes you can feel like maybe it will try to make you look better or make yourself above that person, and then it eventually spreads into other people as well, which is not how it's supposed to be.
Jason?
I often justify gossip because it takes the focus off of me. It's talking about somebody else. And in today's world, that's what we function better that way. It's even in the Bible times, it was that way where as long as you're talking about somebody else, you have the answers. It's a lot easier to see what's wrong. So if we spend time looking elsewhere, we don't have to spend time looking within.
Any of you others have any comments on gossip?
Boy howdy, is it juicy. But it doesn't, for one thing, it make you feel good, look good, but when you're ripping the other person down, but really it's ripping you down too. And let's say you trash this person and trash this person and trash this person. Well, sooner or later you're lower than all the ones you trashed.
Anything else? Do you have any comments on gossip? Nope. Yeah, that was good. So, where was I? Mandy, do you have anything to say to that? To top it all off? No. Okay. Danny. This is my last question for an individual, so we'll decide how we're going to go from here. Audience, if you have anything else to say, be ready. This is changing gears again, but what role does our Anabaptist and Mennonite culture / Mennonite culture play in maintaining our faith?
I think it's actually, it plays a fairly big role. Not too long ago, I would have probably said something different. But thinking about that and actually thinking about the godly heritage that we have is huge. And I think that it can be a trap to where we put too much stock on that. And I think, in my mind, to be a Mennonite is a little bit different. How should I say this? Or I guess that's not necessarily the question, but Mennonite and Christian is a little bit in a different category in my head. So to be a Christian but Mennonite is our culture. And that's about it. It's not what saves me. But to have that heritage is definitely a help, because I think about where I would be if I wouldn't have grown up in a good, godly home. And the answer is who knows where. So I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Amy.
Could you reread the question, please?
What role does our Anabaptist/Mennonite culture play in maintaining our faith?
So it provides much stability, and our traditions, it's how we've always done things. But as far as our own personal faith, that is our own choice, and we have to make that decision ourselves while we do have the framework around us. That does provide stability.
Any of the rest of you? Jason?
Do you want to read the question again? I want to hear how it's worded.
What role does our Anabaptist/Mennonite culture play in maintaining our faith?
At some point, I mean, I get the question, but at some point you limit God to being a part of our culture. And if that's the case, then nobody outside that culture can experience the love of God and the power that he has. So God's love is available to anyone that wants it, and it is fully possible for anyone to be faithful to God. Now, I completely appreciate my Christian heritage as far as that goes, because it saved me from a lot of hurts and a lot of experiences that would have been hard to work through if I hadn't had it. But I still believe that if I hadn't had it and I wanted to experience the love of God, it would be 100% possible for me to be 100% faithful to him.
So is what you're saying is, never mind, I got it. Any other thoughts? Danny, you have anything else to say?
I would just say that as far as the Anabaptists, like the traditions and all that thing, I think we shouldn't do them just because we've always done them that way. There's things that go on like that, and I think we should be able to, as a young person, question that and get a legitimate answer. If not, then I don't know, and then when something becomes like a tradition or something like we've always done, which is, a lot of those things are good, but what's the reason why we do them? I think that's something that we could, I don't know, learn more about. But
All right. Any questions from you guys again? Have all the answers to life. We have 6 capable people up front that can answer anything you have. Maybe not the way you wanted, but nothing. All right, I have one more question, just because we're over time, but all you have is volleyball later tonight and some singing, so there's lots of time for that. It has to do with the family, whether it's marriage or dating or whatever. It's kind of complicated, but I want at least a couple of you, or 3 of you, or 4, or all 6 to answer this. How does the world's view of the family, what other people think when they think of the family, affect how we as Anabaptists view the family? For example, in the world around us, there's the gay parents, there's the single parent homes, there's the working parent homes, there's the ones that wait to have children until you're old, there's the ones that say only have 1 or 2 children. How does that view affect us as Anabaptists? Mennonites, whatever you want to call us, I guess, our community. or waiting to get married until you're older? Any of you have a response to that? I'll go down the line if nobody says anything. How do we deal with that? When we walk into the store with 12 children in tow, that is not an acceptable thing in the world. I mean, sort of. Like, people look at you weird, I guess. Who wants to start? Mandy, do you have anything to say?
I guess to be perfectly honest, not really. I don't really feel like I have any answers really to that question. But it probably does affect us more than we actually realize that it does. Even though we think it might be just, out there. It's probably more in our churches than what we know.
For example, it says in the Bible, children are, were you going to talk? Children are a heritage to the Lord. Like, we're supposed to have children. But even we, me, you, when you see someone walk into church and take up 2 benches or whatever it takes, you're like, you're overdoing it, right? Or not? Like, are we okay with that? Or is that something that's filtering in from the outside? Danny?
I don't know if it's affected us as much as I'm sure it does. As far as something you mentioned was the working parents and stuff like that. That can be kind of intriguing, 2 incomes. But as far as family goes, I don't know if it's. I don't know. I don't think it's affected us too much, but maybe I'm wrong.
Amy?
Well, the drive behind all you said would be trying to get yourself to go further in life and trying to make something of yourself and be a successful person. And I think we all struggle with that being our main goal.
Very good. Anybody else?
What you said about going into a store and people thinking that it's not normal or whatever. But, I mean, they're always used to kids not screaming and yelling. I remember going shopping with my mom, and this little lady comes up and, oh, you have such well-behaved children. Boy, I wanted to tell her, you got to see us when we're at home.
That was as close as I could get to a dating question for some of you. We worked for a guy once that he was like, how many's in your family? I said, there's 9 of us children. Wow. He said, when I went to college, they said that for this world to survive, you need to have 3 or less. And so they had 3 and they stopped. That's the view the world has of the family. Like, they're being taught that too many children, the world's going to end. And we know that the world's going to end regardless of how many children there are. So, anyways, just something to get you thinking. Any comments from the crowd? Should have had you all on the panel, it sounds like. Don't want to talk unless you're forced to. All right, well, thank you for your attention. Sorry about the overtime, but you'll forget it by tomorrow. Gene, I think you're next. Thanks, panel.
Okay, you guys have been in the hot seat long enough here. You can go find a different seat if you want. So, for the rest of the time, thank you very much for your willingness to make yourself very vulnerable. And hopefully that's the last target you'll be for the day. Thank you, Darren, for doing your part. Next on the list is youth singing. Brian's going to head that up. You want to do it up here, I'm assuming? Okay. So then, I'm not sure how long that's going to be. I'll let him decide. Supper is at 5. And then after that, around 6:30, we're planning for some v-ball and also softball. So because of the amount of people we have here, we decided to try and do both while we still have some daylight hours. So at 6:30, those that want to play softball gather out the ball field, and I think Joel's going to be in charge of that. And those that want to play v-ball be in the gym at 6:30. And I think I remember something way back in my mind. I was told one time that good volleyball players make good singers. So don't all wait to show up till the volleyball game. We need some singers up here this afternoon. Anyway, we're going to dismiss. I'll just let Brian take over and be in the gym at 5 for supper. And that's all for right now, I think. Is there anything else, Joel? Did you want to say anything?